Chapter 1. The Eternal Void. Before the beginning, there was only the deep, a profound and absolute absence that stretched beyond comprehension. No light pierced the expanse, no sound echoed through its hollows, no form took shape within its boundless dark. It was a canvas without pigment, a stage without actors, a sea without shores. This was the void, a realm of pure potential, waiting in patient silence for the first stirrings of intention. The waters of the deep lay formless and still, a liquid darkness that reflected nothing, for there was nothing to reflect. They were a substance without feature, a presence without identity, cradled in the womb of non-existence. And over the face of these waters the Spirit of God moved, not as a wind, for there was no air to carry it, nor as a light, for there was no space to illuminate. It was a presence, an awareness that needed no form to manifest its power. The Spirit hovered, brooded, like a great bird over an unhatched egg, its motionless motion a testament to a reality beyond the physical. This was no passive observation, but a deep, contemplative engagement with the nothingness. The Spirit saw the chaos, the tehom, the abyssal deep, and recognized it not as an end, but as a beginning. Within the heart of that which was not, the will to create began to beat its first silent rhythm. The void was not empty of purpose, only of substance. It was a silence waiting for a word, a darkness waiting for a dawn. The very nature of this pre-creation state was one of profound tension, a stillness so complete it seemed to ache for motion, a quiet so absolute it yearned for sound. The deep waters were not hostile, but expectant. They held within their dark currents the unformed matter of universes, the latent energy of stars, the sleeping templates of life. They were the raw material of existence, chaotic and unorganized, yet utterly submissive to the will that now attended them. The omnipotence of God was not expressed in a thunderous display, but in the profound patience of that hovering. It was a power so absolute it could afford to be still, a wisdom so complete it could contemplate the infinite possibilities before speaking a single one into being. There was no rush, no uncertainty, only a deliberate and loving intention to bring order from the chaos, to call forth beauty from the formless, to sculpt meaning from the abyss. The darkness was not a foe to be defeated, but a medium to be transformed. This was the moment before moments, the place where time itself was conceived. In the eternal now of the void, the concept of before and after had no meaning. Yet the Spirit's presence introduced the first seed of sequence, the idea that something could happen. The intention to create was the first fracture in the armor of nothingness, a crack through which the future would soon come flooding in. The chaos of the deep was not meaningless. It was the fertile ground from which all meaning would spring, the raw, unrefined ore from which the cosmos would be forged. And so the stage was set. The dark waters lay passive. The Spirit brooded with infinite creative potential. The void held its breath. All of reality, in all its splendor and complexity, its galaxies and hummingbirds, its mountains and molecules, its joys and sorrows, was compressed into this single, pregnant point of absolute potential. The transition from nothingness to existence was not an accident or a cosmic explosion, but the result of a conscious, loving, and sovereign will poised on the brink of utterance. The first word was forming in the heart of the eternal, a word that would shatter the silence forever and flood the void with the brilliant, unstoppable force of light. Chapter 2. The First Command. Light. From the heart of the hovering silence a word was born. It did not tear the void asunder with violence, but rather it unfolded from the center of all things, a single, resonant utterance that was both sound and substance, command and creation. Let there be light. The words were not spoken into the void, but from within it, as if they were the very first thought of existence itself, given audible form. They carried no echo, for there was nothing for an echo to bounce from, yet they filled the entirety of the formless deep, vibrating through the waters and through the fabric of potential itself. And there was light. It did not dawn slowly, a gradual brightening at some distant horizon, for there were no horizons. It simply was. A pure, undiluted radiance erupted into being everywhere at once, an instantaneous and total immersion in brilliance. The light was not a thing that traveled. It was a state of being that replaced the state of non-being. It flooded the abyss, not as an invasion, but as a homecoming, revealing for the first time the true nature of the deep. The dark waters, once a featureless ink, now shimmered with a trillion points of reflected glory, their surfaces dancing with a liquid, golden fire. The light had texture and depth, a tangible presence that pushed back the oppressive weight of the formless dark, not with force, but with the simple, undeniable authority of its existence. The response of creation to this first command was immediate and absolute. The chaotic elements of the deep, which had lain in passive potential, now stirred with a newfound purpose. The latent energy within the waters seemed to align itself with the frequency of the light, humming with a harmonious vibration. This was the universe's first act of obedience, a seamless and awe-inspiring alignment of matter with divine will. There was no resistance, no friction, only the perfect, instantaneous fulfillment of the spoken word. The authority behind the command was so complete that reality had no option but to conform, to become what it was told to be. The light was not merely illumination, it was the first expression of law, the foundational principle of order imposed upon the chaos. The spirit, which had brooded in the darkness, now moved within the light. Its presence was no longer a solitary vigil over the formless, but a dynamic dance within the formed. The light clung to the spirit, outlining its ethereal movement in shimmering coronas and cascades of effulgence. It was a celebration, a silent, majestic symphony of beginnings. The darkness, which had reigned for an eternity that was not an eternity, did not fight its retreat. It yielded, folding back upon itself, not in defeat, but in deference to a greater reality. It became a defined entity, the absence of light, rather than the totality of everything. In that single moment, the concept of contrast was born. And in the heart of that nascent cosmos, a profound satisfaction bloomed. It was a feeling that permeated the new light, a warmth that was more than thermal, a resonance that was more than sonic. This was the Creator's pleasure, a deep and holy contentment as he beheld the first fruit of his will. The light was good. It was not merely functional or effective. It was inherently, beautifully right. It revealed the potential for beauty, for clarity, for distinction. As the light held the darkness at bay, it created the first space, a realm where things could be seen, known, and loved. The satisfaction was not that of a craftsman admiring a finished product, but of a father beholding his firstborn child, with all the hope and promise that new life embodies. The void was no longer void, for it was now filled with the glorious, commanding, and good presence of light. With the raw, undifferentiated brilliance now flooding the void, the work of creation turned from inception to organization. The light, in its primal, overwhelming state, was a magnificent beginning, but it was not the end. The divine will, having called forth illumination, now moved to give it purpose and rhythm. The light was not to be a constant, blinding glare, but an element in a grander design. With the same effortless authority that had summoned it into being, the Creator began to separate it, to draw boundaries in the fabric of this new reality. It was a gentle, deliberate pulling apart, a cosmic sorting that did not diminish the light, but gave it identity. From the uniform radiance, a distinction emerged as the light was gathered, as if by an unseen hand, into a defined realm, leaving behind a purified, substantial darkness. This was the birth of contrast, the foundation of all perception. Where before there had been only light and its absence, now there were two distinct, coexisting states, a domain of brilliant, life-giving illumination and a domain of deep, restful shadow. The darkness was no longer the formless void of old. It was now a defined entity, given its own space and character. It was a darkness that was not fearful, but necessary, a soft, velvety cloak that provided respite and mystery. The light did not hate the darkness, nor did the darkness flee the light. They were two halves of a whole, partners in a dance ordained by their Maker, and the Creator named them. The act of naming was not a mere formality, but an act of sovereign assignment, of imbuing these new creations with their eternal purpose. The domain of light was called day. The name itself carried the warmth of activity, the clarity of vision, the energy of life and growth. The domain of darkness was called night. This name held the quiet of repose, the depth of mystery, the peace of cessation. With these names, the first cycle was born. There was evening as the gathered light receded, and the name night took its turn. And there was morning as the day returned in its appointed glory. This was the first day, a complete and perfect oscillation between two complementary forces, the inaugural beat of the universe's heart. Order had emerged from chaos. The formless deep now knew rhythm. The timeless void now knew sequence. The establishment of day and night was the first great act of cosmic architecture, the imposition of a temporal structure upon which all future creation would hinge. It was a declaration that the universe would not be a static, monotonous expanse, but a living, breathing entity with its own pulse. The purpose of light was now clear. It was not merely to banish darkness, but to rule the day, to provide the conditions for order, for growth, for the revelation of all that was to come. It was the great revealer, the first tool in the Creator's hand by which the details of the cosmos would be made manifest. As the first cycle completed and the name day gave way to the name night, a profound sense of harmony settled over the newborn cosmos. The chaotic waters were still present, but they were no longer sovereign. They were now framed by this new, regular rhythm of light and dark. The thematic resonance was profound. From the undifferentiated potential of the void, distinction had arisen. From the singular command, a beautiful duality had been born. The light, in its separation and naming, became the cornerstone of time, the fundamental metric by which existence would now be measured, a perpetual testament to the order that flows from a single divine word. Chapter 3, the expanse of heaven. The rhythm of day and night, now established as the steady pulse of the cosmos, became the backdrop for the next great act of separation. The primordial waters, once a single, formless deep, still enveloped all that was, a liquid shroud suspended in the interplay of light and shadow. But the divine intention was for structure, for layers of reality, for a universe of defined spaces. From the heart of that sovereign will came the next command, a decree that would carve volume from the liquid void and sculpt the very architecture of the sky. The voice that had called forth light now spoke to the waters, and the fabric of existence shuddered in response, not in fear, but in eager anticipation of the form it was about to receive. The command resonated through the aqueous expanse, a vibration that sought not to destroy, but to divide. In the midst of the waters, a change began, subtle at first, then with gathering majesty. A vast, invisible force pressed downward upon one portion of the deep and upward upon another. It was not a violent rending, but a gentle, inexorable parting, as if the waters themselves were drawing a breath and holding it, creating a space between. From this act of divine pressure, a firmament began to materialize, not a solid dome, but a vast, ethereal expanse, a crystalline boundary of pure potential forged from the will of God. It was a barrier of breathtaking transparency and strength, a sheet of solidified space that stretched from one non-existent horizon to the other, an immense, curving plate of azure nothingness made manifest. As the firmament solidified, it performed its ordained function, cleaving the unitary waters into two distinct realms. The waters below the firmament gathered and settled, their chaotic churning now organized into a single, vast basin. Above the firmament, the waters above were suspended, held aloft by the same word that had formed the expanse itself. These upper waters were not the storm clouds of a future atmosphere, but a celestial ocean, a reservoir of pure, liquid potential, shimmering with a soft, filtered light that was different from the direct brilliance of the day. They glowed with a pearlescent internal luminescence, a tranquil sea of stars in waiting, their immense weight gracefully borne by the strength of the firmament. The process was one of sublime power, a demonstration of creative authority that needed no raw material but the divine will itself. The firmament was not built, it was spoken. Its emergence was the universe's first great act of interior design, the creation of a ceiling and a floor where before there had been only a homogeneous soup. The lower waters, now defined by their relationship to the expanse above, began to take on a new character, their surfaces reflecting not only the light of day but also the faint, glorious sheen of the waters above. The structured universe was emerging, layer by layer, each new distinction adding depth and complexity to the canvas of creation. This was the plot point upon which the cosmos turned, the moment the formless deep was given its first permanent physical landmark, a sign that chaos was irrevocably in retreat before the advancing tide of divine order. With the firmament now a permanent and breathtaking reality, its vast crystalline curve holding back the celestial oceans above, the Creator turned his attention to the act of naming. This was no mere application of a label, but a sacred bestowal of identity and purpose, a final seal upon the work of separation. The voice that had carved the expanse from the waters now spoke its name into the fabric of its being, and the word echoed through the newly structured cosmos with the weight of eternal decree. Heaven. The name was not a description, but a definition, imbuing the firmament with its role as the great divider, the boundary between the terrestrial and the celestial, the finite and the infinite. The name settled upon the expanse like a coronation, and in that moment its nature seemed to deepen and clarify. It was no longer just a barrier or a partition. It was heaven, the vault of the sky, the dwelling place of mysteries yet to be unveiled. Its vastness was not an empty space, but a realm of immense potential, a canvas prepared for the sun, moon, and stars. Its beauty was in its sheer scale, an azure immensity that stretched beyond any conceivable horizon, a dome of such perfect proportion that it spoke of a geometry known only to the divine mind. Looking up, one could sense not a limit, but an invitation, a gateway to the infinite, curving away into the glorious unknown. This heaven was a testament to the theme of boundaries, not as restrictions, but as the very source of meaning and relationship. The lower waters knew themselves as seas because of the firmament above. The upper waters understood their celestial nature because of the expanse below. Heaven itself was defined by what it separated and what it connected. It was the mediator, the interface, where the breath of God would one day stir the winds and where the lights of the cosmos would be hung to mark times and seasons. Its design was flawless, a masterwork of divine engineering that balanced immense forces with an effortless grace, holding back oceans with the strength of a spoken word. As the first day turned to night and back again, the sky began to reveal its dynamic character. In the day, it was a dome of the purest, most brilliant blue, a color that seemed to drink the light and radiate it back as a soft, pervasive glow. At night, it transformed into a profound, velvety black, a depth against which the first faint hints of reflection from the waters above sometimes glimmered like distant sleeping fire. It was a beauty of contrasts, a spectacle of serene majesty that changed with the rhythm of the days, yet remained eternally constant in its purpose. The expanse was both a shield and a window, protecting the world taking shape below while offering a glimpse of the glory reserved above. And in the heart of the Creator there was a deep contemplative satisfaction as he beheld the named heaven. This was not the raw pleasure of power displayed, but the quiet joy of a perfect concept realized. The firmament was more than a structure. It was a symbol of his orderly nature, a physical manifestation of the principle that life and cosmos flourish within defined spaces. Its vast, beautiful arch was a perpetual reminder of a design that was both purposeful and magnificent, a boundary set not to confine, but to create, to distinguish, and to reveal the glorious architecture of a universe built on the foundation of His will. The heavens stood, silent and immense, a finished work awaiting the next movement in the symphony of creation. Chapter 4. The Gathering of Waters. The world was a sphere of suspended oceans, a globe of water cradled within the vault of heaven, its surface a single, unbroken skin of shifting grays and blues that mirrored the pearlescent seas above. For 3 divine days, the rhythm of light and dark had pulsed across this aqueous world, revealing only the endless heaving plains of the deep. But the Creator's work was one of progressive revelation, of drawing forth the hidden potentials slumbering within the formless. The command that next broke the cosmic silence was not one of creation ex nihilo, but of organization, a summons that would call the very bones of the earth up from their liquid tomb. The voice spoke to the waters under the heaven, and the word was a gathering, a drawing together that resonated to the core of the planet. The response was not instantaneous like the light, but a slow tectonic awakening. A deep, groaning shudder passed through the entirety of the submerged world, a vibration so low and profound it was felt rather than heard. The waters, which had lain in a restless, chaotic unity, now began to stir with a new directed purpose. It was as if a colossal, invisible net had been cast through their depths, gathering the liquid masses toward certain points on the globe. Immense currents, vaster than any that would ever flow again, began to move, not with the random fury of a storm, but with the solemn, deliberate motion of a procession. They pulled away from the rising forms that were beginning to push upward from the abyssal plains, their retreat uncovering the first tentative peaks of a hidden world. From the profound darkness of the sea floor, the land began to rise. It did not erupt in volcanic fury, but emerged with the stately, irresistible force of a sleeper awakening. Great mountain ranges, their backs still streaming with the waters of the deep, broke the surface for the first time, their peaks tasting an air they had never known. Vast continental shelves lifted themselves from the ooze, shedding rivers of returning ocean as they rose into the light of the first day of this new work. The sound was a roar of displacement, a colossal grinding sigh as billions of tons of rock and soil were delivered from their watery womb. The waters, obedient to the divine will, did not cling to the emerging land, but flowed back, pooling into the deepening basins that were being carved by the very ascent of the continents. The drama of the shifting earth and sea was a spectacle of raw elemental power, perfectly harnessed. The dry land appeared not as a single monolithic entity, but in a breathtaking variety of forms. There were jagged young mountains, their stone teeth sharp against the sky. There were rolling, ancient hills, softened by eons of submersion. There were wide, flat plains of rich, dark soil, steaming gently in the new air, and between them the gathered waters carved their own identities. Deep, abyssal trenches that swallowed the light, broad, sunlit seas that danced with waves, and narrow, winding channels that threaded through the newborn landscapes. The obedience of the elements was absolute. The sea knew its boundaries, and the land knew its place, each yielding to the command that had called them into distinction. As the great work of separation reached its climax, the world was transformed. No longer a water world, it was now a planet of stunning contrast. The deep blue of the gathered seas now lay against the rich, varied hues of the revealed earth. The gray of stone, the umber of clay, the black of fertile loam. The waters, once sovereign, now adorned the land, cradling its coastlines and filling its depths, their purpose refined from encompassing all to complementing the new. The dry ground stood firm, a testament to the divine will that had called it forth, its very existence a perfect illustration of creation's submission to its Creator. The stage was now set, the foundation laid for the bursted forth of life that would soon clothe the naked earth in a garment of green. With the dry land fully revealed and the seas gathered into their appointed basins, a profound stillness fell over the newborn world, a silence of appraisal and completion. The raw, elemental chaos of the shifting earth and receding waters had given way to a landscape of breathtaking definition and form. The Creator's gaze swept over the new contours of the planet from the highest mountain peaks, whose stone shoulders seemed to scrape the lower vault of heaven down to the deepest oceanic trenches, where the light of day faded into a perpetual mysterious twilight. This was no longer a formless deep or a simple expanse of sky and water. This was a world of intricate detail and stunning variety, a canvas prepared for the brushstrokes of life. And in the heart of the eternal, a deep and resonant joy began to swell, a pleasure more complex and textured than any that had come before. This joy was not merely for the fact of the land's existence, but for its astonishing diversity. The earth was not a monolith. It was a tapestry woven from 1,000 different threads of geology and geography. There were soaring crags of granite and basalt, their faces sheer and dramatic, carved by the retreating seas into fantastical shapes that caught the light of day and cast long, intricate shadows across the valleys below. There were gentle, rolling hills, their slopes smooth and inviting, covered in a fine, dark dust that seemed to promise fertility. Vast, flat plains stretched to the horizon, their surfaces unbroken and immense, while rugged badlands displayed layers of colored rock like pages in a geological history book. Each formation, from the smallest pebble beach to the grandest continental shield, was a unique expression of the Creator's imaginative power, a thought given solid, enduring form. And the Creator spoke, bestowing names with the same authority that had shaped the substances themselves. The dry land was called Earth. The name was firm, grounded, and foundational, echoing with the solidity of rock and the potential of soil. It was a name that spoke of stability, of a platform upon which the future would be built. The gathered waters were called seas. This name was plural, acknowledging their separation into distinct bodies, each with its own character. The vast, deep ocean, the shallower, sun-warmed sea, the tranquil gulf, the turbulent strait. The names were not merely labels. They were definitions that locked the new order into the permanent lexicon of creation, establishing the fundamental relationship between the solid and the liquid, the foundation and its adornment. This act of naming was accompanied by a divine approval that was palpable, a warmth that seemed to emanate from the sky itself and settle upon the new landscapes. The earth was good. The seas were good. Their goodness lay in their perfect functionality, their beautiful interplay, and their sheer delightful variety. The joy of the Creator was in the texture of a sandstone cliff, the smoothness of a river-worn stone, the immense, silent depth of a marine abyss, and the playful sparkle of sunlight on a wave. It was a joy in form itself, in the curve of a bay, the sharp line of a ridge, the endless flat expanse of a desert in the making. He saw the potential for forests to cloak the mountains, for rivers to vein the plains, for coral to jewel the seabeds. Every contour of the land, every basin of the sea, was a premeditated delight, a specific thought realized in rock and water. This moment was a profound character revelation of the Creator. His joy was not that of a distant architect reviewing a blueprint, but that of an artist falling in love with the emerging sculpture. It was an intimate, personal satisfaction in the tangible reality of what he had made. The variety of the earth spoke of a mind that cherished difference and celebrated particularity. The form of the land, its highs and lows, its rough and smooth, revealed a love for contrast and harmony, for the way a mountain could give meaning to a valley, and a sea could define a coastline. The foundation was now complete, not as a sterile platform, but as a work of art in its own right, a testament to a creator whose power was matched only by his appreciation for beauty, whose authority was expressed in the crafting of a world he found deeply and unreservedly good. Chapter 5. The Sprouting of Life. The naked earth, newly risen from the deep, lay exposed under the rhythm of day and night, a vast sculpture of stone and soil, beautiful in its form, but silent in its substance. It was a body awaiting a soul, a skeleton waiting for flesh. The foundational work of separation was complete. Now the work of filling would begin. From the heart of the Creator, who had rejoiced in the contours of the land and the boundaries of the seas, came a new command, one not directed at the waters or the firmament, but at the earth itself. It was a summons to the latent potential sleeping within the dark, rich loam, a call for the ground to become not just a stage, but a participant in the drama of life. The word went forth, and the soil, which had known only the weight of water and the touch of wind, began to quicken. A tremor passed through the topmost layers of the earth, a subtle vibration that was the soil's first act of conscious response. It was not the tectonic shudder of the land's emergence, but a softer, more intimate stirring, as if a billion tiny hearts had begun to beat in unison deep within the humus. The command had ignited a spark of generative power in the very dust of the ground, a power that now surged upward, seeking the light. At first, the change was invisible, a subterranean shift as countless seeds, not planted by any hand but conceived in the mind of God and woven into the fabric of the earth, began to swell with the imperative to live. They were blueprints of grass, herb, and tree, encoded with their specific kinds, and they now stirred from their slumber. Then the first green appeared. It did not come in a wave, but in a million isolated points, a constellation of emerald sparks igniting across the plains, dotting the hillsides, and clinging to the cracks in the mountain stone. It was the tender, almost hesitant blade of grass, pushing aside a pebble to unfurl its first slender leaf to the sun. Beside it, the broader, softer leaves of herbs emerged, their shapes infinitely varied, some round, some serrated, some feathery, each a perfect expression of its kind. The soil, once passive, was now actively given birth, its surface breaking open in a silent, joyous eruption of life. The burst of green was not a color, it was a presence, a vibrant, living carpet that began to drape itself over the raw geology of the world. From the low-lying carpets of grass and herb, the growth reached higher. Saplings, their stems still soft and pale, shot up from the earth, their leaves unfolding like tiny praying hands. They grew with a visible hastening energy, their branches stretching toward the heavens, their trunks thickening by the moment. They were not all the same. Some were slender and supple, destined to be willows by future streams, while others were stout and determined, the first oaks and cedars. The command had been for each according to its kind, and the diversity was staggering. There were trees with smooth bark and trees with rough, trees with needles that clustered tightly, and trees with broad leaves that whispered in the first breezes. The barren rock and naked soil were being clothed in a garment of unimaginable complexity and beauty, a tapestry woven from 1,000 shades of green. The themes of abundance and provision were woven into every sprouting leaf. The grasses that blanketed the plains were not merely decoration, they were a future pasture. The herbs that sprang from the soil carried within them the aromas of mint and thyme, the sustenance of future grains, the chemistry of healing. The trees were not just pillars of wood, they were promises of shade, of fruit, of strong timber, and of nests for wings not yet created. The entire earth was being transformed into a provisioned home, a self-sustaining system where life would nurture life. The Creator's foresight was evident in every detail, in the way a vine knew to climb, a root knew to seek water, a leaf knew to turn toward the light. This was not a random explosion of flora, but the careful, deliberate unpacking of a divine economy of abundance where every need was anticipated and every niche was filled. The silent world now hummed with the silent, vigorous song of growth, a verdant hymn to the God who provides. The initial burst of green that had clothed the earth was merely the overture to a symphony of staggering diversity. As the first day of vegetative life unfolded under the cycling heavens, the full scope of the Creator's botanical design became gloriously apparent. This was no monoculture, no simple blanket of sameness, but a meticulously crafted mosaic of interdependent lives. Every contour of the land now hosted its own specialized community. Lush grasses, fine as silk, swayed in whispering waves across the sun-drenched plains, their roots knitting the soil into a tight, living fabric that would resist the erosion of wind and water. On the rocky slopes, tenacious herbs with silver-gray leaves and deep, searching taproots clung to crevices, their very existence a testament to resilience. In the low, moist hollows, ferns uncurled their intricate fronds like living lace, thriving in the damp shade that would be lethal to sun-worshipping cousins. This diversity was encoded at the most fundamental level, in the seed. Each plant, according to its kind, produced its own unique vessel of continuation. Some seeds were dust fine, designed to ride the winds across vast distances, ensuring their kind would find new footholds in untamed earth. Others were encased in hard, protective shells meant to survive the digestive tracts of creatures not yet formed, to be deposited far from the parent plant with a packet of fertile nourishment. There were seeds with tiny hooks that would one day cling to animal fur, and seeds buoyant enough to float across seas on voyages of colonization. The sheer ingenuity of these designs spoke of a mind that valued not just life, but the perpetuation of life in all its forms. The seed was a promise, a tiny ark carrying the entire genetic blueprint of a giant redwood or a humble clover, a perfect, self-contained system for ensuring that the earth would never again be bare. This was not a system left to chance. The deliberate design for sustainability was woven into the very relationships between plants and their environment. The tall trees, with their broad canopies, created microclimates of cool shade below, allowing shade-tolerant mosses and fungi to flourish, which in turn broke down fallen leaves into rich humus, feeding the very trees that sheltered them. Nitrogen-fixing plants grew alongside others, enriching the soil for their neighbors. Flowering plants, though their pollinators were not yet created, already displayed the bright colors and intricate patterns that would one day attract bees and butterflies. Their structures a preemptive invitation to a partnership that would ensure cross-pollination and genetic vitality. The ecosystem was a web of mutual support, a circular economy of give and take where nothing was wasted and every organism played a role in maintaining the health of the whole. The care of the Creator was evident in this perfect, self-regulating balance. And woven through this functional sustainability was a breathtaking, almost extravagant beauty. It was a beauty that served no apparent purpose beyond sheer delight. The undersides of certain leaves were brushed with silver, visible only when turned by breeze. The bark of some trees was a canvas of intricate patterns, from the smooth, coppery skin of the madrone to the deeply fissured, rugged hide of the oak. Flowers, in their silent, unpollinated state, were already explosions of color and form. Velvet petals in crimson and gold, delicate trumpets of ivory white, complex geometric shapes that fascinated the eye. This beauty was a thematic element reinforcing the character of the creator. It was the signature of an artist who loved his work, who embedded joy and wonder into the practical framework of survival. The order of the cosmos was not a stern utilitarian order, but one that celebrated elegance, variety, and sensory pleasure. As the day wore on, the thematic elements of care and divine order became inseparable. The careful placement of a water-loving willow near a nascent stream, the way a pine tree's needles created an acidic soil that only certain companion plants could tolerate, the brilliant design of a dandelion seed, it all pointed to a profound, attentive intelligence. The world was not simply made, it was curated. Each plant, from the mightiest tree to the most humble blade of grass, was placed within a network of relationships that would sustain it and that it would, in turn, sustain. This was a garden planet, a provisioned and beautiful home, established with a father's care and an artist's eye, its every leaf and seed a silent testament to the orderly, loving, and glorious mind from which it all sprang. Chapter 6. The Luminaries in the Sky. The world now breathed with the quiet rhythm of vegetative life, its hills and valleys draped in a tapestry of green, its air carrying the faint, sweet scent of pollen and damp earth. Yet the heavens above remained a vast, empty canvas. The firmament, that magnificent expanse separating the waters above from the waters below, held only the shifting, reflected glow of the celestial seas, a soft, pearlescent luminescence that provided a constant, muted twilight, but no definition to the passage of time beyond the primordial cycle of light and dark. The earth below was ready, provisioned and waiting, but the sky was a story yet to be written, a clock without hands. From the heart of the Creator, who had shaped the land and filled it with potential, now came the command that would crown the heavens with glory and give the earth its first true measure of days and seasons. The voice that spoke was the same that had calmed the chaos of the deep, but its tone now held a new quality, one of intricate craftsmanship, of detailed artistry. The command was not a single, sweeping decree, but a focused, deliberate act of ignition. And in the expanse of the firmament, a point of concentrated fire bloomed into being. It was not the all-encompassing light of the first day, but a defined, ferocious sphere of incandescent plasma, the sun. Its birth was not a silent unfolding, but a roaring, triumphant conflagration that instantly claimed dominion over the day. Its light was different from the primal light. It was a golden, life-giving radiance, warm and direct, casting sharp, definitive shadows for the first time. The leaves of the plants below seemed to stir and orient themselves toward this new sovereign star, their chlorophyll awakening to its specific frequency. As the sun's brilliant rule was established, a second, softer light kindled in the opposite arc of the sky. The moon emerged, a great, serene pearl of reflected glory. It was not a source of fire, but a mirror of calm, silver light, its surface a mosaic of plains and highlands that would one day inspire myths and poetry. Its light did not battle the sun's, but complemented it, a gentle queen to the sun's king. And then, in the vast, velvety darkness that was the moon's domain, a million more points of light flickered into existence. The stars were born, not in a slow procession, but in a single, breathtaking explosion of brilliance, as if a billion diamonds had been scattered across the black dome of night. They were not all the same. Some burned with a fierce blue-white intensity, while others glowed with a steady, ruddy patience, clustered into swirling patterns and lonely sentinels. The awe of the moment was in the sheer scale of this new architecture. The sun, a titan of fire, ruled the day with an authority that dictated the very tilt of the growing plants. The moon, a celestial medallion, governed the night, its phases a silent, predictable rhythm yet to be observed. The stars, in their countless multitudes, were not random decoration but fixed markers, a celestial map of profound complexity and order. Their initial roles were immediately, perfectly clear. The sun was for the day, to separate light from darkness, to warm the soil, and to drive the processes of growth and decay. The moon and stars were for the night, not to defeat the darkness, but to rule it, to punctuate its depth with guidance and beauty, to provide a lesser light that would comfort and orient. This ignition of the heavens was the final, masterful stroke in the establishment of cosmic order. The formless void had been given form. The form had been filled, and now the filling was given its rhythm and its rulers. The earth was no longer an isolated sphere under a generic sky. It was now the center of a magnificent, ordered clockwork, its days measured by the sun's journey, its months by the moon's cycle, its years by the dance of the constellations. The initial, undefined light of the first day had now been refined, focused, and appointed to specific offices in the celestial government. The universe was no longer just structured. It was timed, measured, and crowned with a glory that reflected the meticulous, sovereign mind of its maker. The stage for life was not just set. It was now illuminated, its scenes marked by the grand, moving luminaries in the sky. With the celestial bodies now burning in their appointed places, their light was not merely for illumination, but for instruction. The sun, moon, and stars were more than glorious ornaments. They were the first teachers of the nascent world, their movements a silent, universal language written across the sky. The sun's daily arc from horizon to horizon became the fundamental measure of earthly time, dividing existence into manageable portions of labor and rest, growth and dormancy. Its path was not static, but began a slow, year-long migration north and south, a celestial pendulum whose swing would dictate the very pulse of life on the planet. This was the first great purpose of the luminaries, to establish the seasons. The longer, warmer days of the sun's northern journey would signal a time of bursting growth and abundance, while its retreat south would bring a season of cooling, of drawing inward, of necessary rest for the soil. The earth's vegetation, already programmed with divine foresight, would learn to read this celestial clock, timing its germination, flowering, and fruiting to the sun's reliable rhythm. The moon, with its slower, more mysterious cycle of waxing and waning, provided a secondary, more intimate measure. Its silvery face became a celestial dial, marking the passage of months. Its pull, though the tides were not yet created, was a latent force, a promise of future influence over the gathered seas. But its primary role, along with the scattered stars, was to serve as signs. They were fixed points of reference in the seemingly chaotic expanse of night, a constant for any future navigator, whether a bird on its first migration or a human gazing upward in wonder. The constellations were not random scatterings. They were grouped into recognizable patterns, a hunter, a bear, a crown, each a story written in light, a mnemonic device, embedded in the cosmos to guide, to warn, and to inspire awe. They were the unchanging landmarks in the celestial ocean, allowing for orientation in both space and time, their positions shifting predictably with the seasons, further refining the calendar written by the sun. This intricate system of timekeeping and guidance was a profound reflection of God's glory. The reliability of the cosmos spoke of a creator who is not capricious, but faithful and orderly. The sun did not decide to linger or hasten on a whim. It followed a law set in place from its first moment of ignition. The stars did not wander from their appointed paths. This cosmic constancy was a testament to the trustworthiness of the divine character. The creation could depend on its heavenly rulers because they themselves were utterly dependent on the unwavering will of their Maker. The glory was in the perfect, silent obedience of these colossal furnaces and distant suns, their immense power perfectly harnessed to serve a purpose beyond themselves. They were humble monarchs, ruling not for their own aggrandizement, but to serve the life that would soon teem upon the earth below. The luminaries guided creation by providing the stable environment necessary for its flourishing. The consistent cycle of day and night, warmed by the sun and softened by the moon, allowed for the metabolic rhythms of future animals. The predictable seasons would govern hibernation, mating, and harvest. Even the light itself was a guide. The sun's rays directed plant growth, the moon's glow would one day guide nocturnal creatures, and the stars would provide a map for travelers. Every aspect of the celestial design pointed toward a creation that was not thrown together, but carefully led and nurtured. The heavens were a gentle, constant hand upon the shoulder of the earth, steering it through time with infinite patience and precision. In their silent, majestic dance, the sun, moon, and stars became the ultimate reflectors of divine artistry. Their beauty was not functional alone. The breathtaking palette of a sunset, the serene face of a full moon hanging in a star-studded velvet sky, the shimmering path of the Milky Way, these were gifts of pure aesthetic pleasure. They reflected a God who delighted in beauty for its own sake, who painted the cosmos with a grandeur that far exceeded mere utility. To look up was to see a declaration of His majesty, a visual symphony of power, order, and breathtaking splendor. The celestial bodies, in their ruling, their signing, and their timekeeping, were perpetual priests of a cosmic temple, their very existence a never-ending hymn of praise to the glory of the God who spoke them into being. Chapter 7. The Swarming of the Seas. The world, now a symphony of coordinated rhythms, the sun's daily arc, the moon's monthly cycle, the earth's verdant breath, turned its attention to the one realm that remained a silent, liquid mystery. The seas, gathered into their deep basins and named by divine decree, lay under the sky as vast, placid plains of blue, their surfaces mirroring the celestial dance above, but their depths holding a profound and unbroken stillness. They were the last great frontier of the formless, a reminder of the primordial deep from which all had emerged, now awaiting their own transformation from mere substance to teeming, vibrant life. The command that now rolled forth from the Creator was not one of separation or formation, but of animation, a summons that would call forth motion and consciousness from the silent, aqueous abyss, filling the oceans with a swarming, breathing, pulsing testament to divine creativity. The Word struck the surface of the waters not as a shock, but as a permeating vibration, a frequency of life that sank into the very heart of the seas. The response began not on the sunlit surface, but in the profound, lightless trenches and the vast open midwaters. The water itself seemed to thicken, to quicken, as if infused with a new, vital spark. Then, from the invisible, nutrient-rich currents, the first forms began to condense. They were not simple, generic shapes, but an explosion of specific, intricate designs, each a unique solution to the challenge of aquatic existence. The first fish darted into being, their scales flashing like scattered coins of silver and bronze as they materialized in shimmering schools. Their bodies were miracles of hydrodynamics, sleek and muscular, propelled by fins that were both oars and rudders. Their gills, a delicate pre-programmed system for breathing the very water they inhabited. But the command called for more than the small and the swift. From the darker, colder depths, where the pressure could crush stone, immense shadows began to stir. The great sea monsters, the leviathans of the deep, uncoiled their colossal forms from the abyssal plains. Their size was beyond any scale the world had yet known, their bodies moving with a slow tectonic grace that spoke of immense power held in reserve. Some had long, serpentine necks that rose like living pillars from the water, their heads surveying the new world with ancient, intelligent eyes. Others were armored in plates of bone, their jaws capable of swallowing schools of the smaller fish whole, their tails churning the water into foam. They were the kings and queens of the liquid realm, embodiments of the wild, untamable power of the deep. Their very presence, a declaration that the seas would be a domain of both delicate beauty and sublime, awe-inspiring majesty. The diversity of forms was a spectacle of divine imagination. There were creatures with bodies as transparent as glass, their internal organs visible like intricate clockwork, perfectly camouflaged in the sun-dappled upper layers. Others, in the midnight zone, were equipped with their own constellations of bioluminescent lights, glowing lures and patterns that turned their bodies into living lanterns in the perpetual dark. There were rays like underwater birds, flapping their wide, fleshy wings in a graceful, undulating flight over the seabed. There were crustaceans, scuttling into existence with jointed armor and clever claws, and jellyfish pulsating like living, gelatinous flowers, their tentacles trailing with a deadly elegant beauty. Every conceivable niche of the marine world was filled in an instant, from the sun-bleached coral reefs beginning to form their stony cities to the open ocean's endless blue. The movements of this new life were as varied as their forms. The frantic, synchronized darting of a bait ball, a single swirling organism made of 1,000 individual fish, was a dance of survival and unity. The solitary, meandering path of a deep-sea giant was a meditation on solitude and power. The playful leaps of smaller creatures from the waves were pure expressions of joy in motion, their bodies glistening in the sunlight before slicing back into their element The seas, once silent and passive, were now a three-dimensional tapestry of constant purposeful motion. The swarming was not a chaos, but a complex, beautiful order, a ballet of fins and flippers, a symphony of swirling patterns and sudden explosive bursts of speed, all flowing from the single creative command that had turned the silent waters into a living, breathing, swarming world. As the seas teemed with their newfound life, a profound shift occurred in the nature of their existence. The initial command had been one of emergence, calling forms from the liquid void, but now the divine voice spoke again, this time not to summon being, but to bestow purpose and permanence. The blessing fell upon the waters like a gentle, penetrating rain, a soft authority that settled into the very DNA of every swimming creature, from the microscopic plankton drifting in the sunlit currents to the great leviathans patrolling the abyssal plains. It was a blessing of fruitfulness, a command to multiply, an imperative to fill the oceans with their own kind. This was not a suggestion, but the activation of a deep biological clockwork, the ignition of a reproductive engine that would ensure the seas would never again be silent, but would forever pulse with the rhythm of generation upon generation. The emphasis of the blessing was on their glorious diversity and their specific, ordained roles. Each creature, fashioned according to its kind, was now commissioned to perpetuate that unique expression of divine creativity. The swift, silvery baitfish were blessed to become vast, shimmering clouds, their immense numbers forming the foundational layer of the marine food web, converting the energy of the sun, filtered through plankton, into flesh for larger beings. The great predators, the sharks with their flawless senses, the orcas with their cunning intelligence, were blessed to be a few but powerful. Their role to prune and to balance, to ensure the health and vitality of the schools they hunted. The gentle grazers, like the immense whale sharks, were blessed to cruise the open oceans. Their wide mouths filtering countless gallons of water, their existence a gentle, slow-moving testament to the abundance of the sea. Every niche, from the cleaner wrassa that would dart into the mouths of larger fish to perform their symbiotic duty, to the octopus with its problem-solving mind hiding in a coral crevice, was now a permanent, self-replicating office in the aquatic kingdom. This multiplication was not a mere numbers game. It was the mechanism for filling the earth. The seas, in their vastness, were now a cradle of life, a nursery that would one day spill its bounty onto the land and into the air. The genetic codes embedded within each kind contained not just the blueprint for their own bodies, but the potential for all the variations and adaptations that would ever be. The blessing ensured that the creative work was now, in a sense, delegated. The command to be fruitful was a sharing of generative power, an invitation for the creation itself to participate in the ongoing work of filling and sustaining the world. The oceans became a living, breathing engine of biodiversity, their currents carrying larvae and eggs to distant shores and unexplored depths, ensuring that every corner of the watery world would be inhabited according to its capacity. And as this blessing settled over the swarming seas, a deep, resonant pleasure emanated from the Creator. This was a different joy than that felt at the sculpting of the mountains or the naming of the dry land. This was the joy of a parent watching their children come to life, not just in form, but in action and purpose. He observed the vibrant, bustling life of the oceans with an artist's fondness for a masterpiece in motion. He saw the perfect, flashing synchronization of the schooling fish, a living, fluid metal that turned and dove as one mind. He watched the ancient, placid journey of the sea turtles, their flippers pushing them through the water with a timeless grace. He beheld the playful curiosity of the dolphins as they leaped for the sheer joy of it, their sleek bodies cutting arcs of spray against the sky. The oceans were no longer a passive element. They were a community, a society of countless interconnected lives, each fulfilling its role in a complex, beautiful, and harmonious whole. This pleasure was in the vibrancy itself, in the churning water, the flicker of 1,000 fins, the slow bloom of a jellyfish, the formidable silhouette of a hunting shark. It was the satisfaction of seeing potential realized, of witnessing the silent liquid realms transformed into a theater of constant dynamic interaction. The seas reflected an aspect of his own nature, not just power and order, but fecundity, joy, and the delight in community. The blessing had turned the waters into a self-perpetuating fountain of life, a testament to a generosity that did not simply create and abandon, but that empowered, sustained, and took profound pleasure in the vibrant, multiplying, and purpose-filled world he had made. Chapter 8. The Winged Creatures. The world now hummed with the rhythms of life, the silent, steadfast growth of the land, the teeming, pulsing dance of the seas. Yet the great expanse between them, the vault of heaven, remained a domain of pure transit, its winds stirring the leaves and rippling the waters but carrying no life of their own. The sky was a road without travelers, a stage without performers. But the Creator's work was one of filling every realm, of ensuring that no part of his cosmos would be left empty of the joy of existence. The command that next echoed through the newborn world was not directed at the land or the sea, but at the very waters themselves, a call for life to break the surface tension of its liquid cradle and claim the boundless freedom of the air. Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And from the shores, the estuaries, and the calm sun-warmed lagoons, a new kind of stirring began. It was not the subterranean quickening of seeds or the deep-water condensation of fish, but a rustling, a cracking, a beating against the very medium of life. From the reeds and the floating vegetation, forms began to emerge, shaking the water from bodies that were not designed for swimming alone. The first wings, damp and folded, were unfurled to the sun. They were not all the same. Some were long and narrow, built for speed and soaring on the high currents, while others were short and broad, designed for the frantic, agile maneuvering amongst the trees. They were feathered not with the scales of fish, but with a new, miraculous substance, light, strong, and intricately structured to catch the air and defy the pull of the earth. The first flight was a moment of pure, unadulterated revelation. A single creature, perhaps an ancestor of the heron, with long, graceful legs still trailing water, beat its great wings once, twice, and then pushed off from the marshy ground. Its initial ascent was clumsy, a frantic sculling against the unfamiliar element, but then it found the air, truly found it. Its wings caught an updraft, and it rose not like a stone thrown, but like a thought ascending, its body becoming one with the wind. The joy of that first motion was palpable, a silent shout of triumph that seemed to vibrate through the atmosphere itself. It was freedom incarnate, a liberation from the two-dimensional world of land and sea into the three-dimensional vastness of the sky. Soon the air was filled with them. Flocks of smaller birds exploded from the coastal shrubs, a cloud of whirring wings and chirping excitement, their flight a chaotic, joyful stippling against the blue. High above, the first raptors circled, their keen eyes already scanning the earth below, their flight a masterpiece of minimal effort and maximum control, riding the thermal winds as if they were stairways to heaven. The varieties were as endless as the forms in the sea. There were birds whose plumage was a camouflage of dappled browns and grays, perfect for blending into the bark of trees or the dappled forest floor. Others were born with coats of outrageous brilliant color, scarlet, sapphire, and emerald, as if the very rainbow had been shattered and given wings. Some had legs adapted for wading in the shallows, with long, delicate bills for spearing fish. Others had powerful crushing beaks for cracking seeds and nuts, or curved, sharp talons for grasping prey. There were songbirds, whose throats, though yet silent, were fashioned with the complex syrinx that would one day pour out melodies to greet the dawn. There were waterfowl with webbed feet and waterproof feathers, as at home on the surface of a lake as in the air above it. Each was a unique answer to the challenge of flight, a specific expression of the theme of motion and freedom. This was the birth of a new kind of joy in creation, the joy of motion for its own sake. The fish swam to eat or to flee, but the birds flew for the sheer exhilaration of it. They dove and rolled in the air. They raced each other on the wind. They hung motionless, suspended by an invisible hand, only to fold their wings and drop like stones before pulling up in a breathtaking arc. Their flight was a dance, a celebration of the atmosphere, a living proof that the world was not just for survival, but for play, for beauty, for the pure, unadulterated pleasure of movement. The sky, once empty, was now a canvas for their aerial artistry, and with every beat of their wings, they wrote a new hymn of freedom upon the wind, a testament to the God who had not only given them life, but had given them the sky, once a silent, empty expanse, now thrummed with a new music. It was not the roar of wind or the patter of rain, but a living symphony composed of whirring wings and the first tentative notes of song. As the initial shock of flight settled into the natural rhythm of existence, the true character of the winged creatures began to unfold, revealing a dimension of creation dedicated to beauty, communication, and intricate social dance. The air became a medium not just for travel, but for expression, each species contributing its unique voice to the chorus of the new world. A lone bird, perched on the highest branch of a newly sprouted cypress, tilted its head back and let out a clear, piercing whistle that cut through the morning air, a simple, declarative statement of being that was the very first avian song. It was answered by another, then another, until the grove was alive with a cascading interplay of calls and responses, a complex language of territory, recognition, and pure, unadulterated joy that needed no words. This auditory tapestry was matched by a visual spectacle of breathtaking extravagance. The colors of the birds were not merely functional, they were a divine palette unleashed. A flash of iridescent blue and green marked the passage of a kingfisher over a slow-moving river, its colors shifting with the angle of the light like living metal. In the shadowy depths of the forest, a bird with plumage of deep crimson and jet black moved like a flickering ember. The subtle, intricate patterns on the wings of a sparrow, delicate bars of brown and gray, were as carefully wrought as the grand, ostentatious tail of a peacock which fanned out in a breathtaking jeweled tapestry of emerald and sapphire eyes, a display of such audacious beauty it seemed to celebrate itself. Every feather was a masterpiece of microscopic structure, each barb and hook locked together to form a surface that could repel water, capture heat, or simply stun the eye with its perfection. Their behaviors wove them into the very fabric of the world, establishing their essential place in the emerging ecosystem. The industrious woodpecker, with its chisel-like beak, began its rhythmic tapping on the bark of a tree, its specialized tongue already seeking out the burrowing insects that threatened the wood, its role as a physician of the forest beginning with its first drumming beat. High above, vultures circled on motionless wings, their presence not one of death, but of purification, appointed as the silent, efficient custodians of the land below. The social weaver birds began constructing their sprawling communal nests in the acacia trees, their collective effort a testament to cooperation and the drive to build a shared future. Each behavior, from the solitary hunt of the owl to the synchronized flocking of starlings that moved as a single, swirling cloud, was a pre-programmed expression of purpose, a vital thread in the web of life that connected the sky to the earth and the water, and as the Creator observed this vibrant, chirping, soaring multitude, a deep and resonant approval settled over the realm of the air. He saw not just the functional perfection of a wing or the efficiency of a beak, but the sheer, delightful artistry of it all. He observed the comical bobbing walk of a wading bird, the fierce focused gaze of a hunting hawk, the tender care of a mother bird tucking her chicks beneath her wings. His pleasure was in the harmony, the way the swoop of a swallow perfectly complemented the flow of the river, the way the morning chorus greeted the rising sun, the way the silent flight of an owl was the perfect counterpoint to the noisy bustle of the day. The birds were more than inhabitants of the sky. They were its animating spirit, its musicians, its artists, and its messengers. This approval reinforced the great theme of harmony that had been building since the first separation of light from dark. The birds, in their songs, their colors, and their purposeful lives, were a perfect illustration of a universe where beauty and function, individuality and community, freedom and purpose were seamlessly intertwined. They filled their appointed place in the world not as cogs in a machine, but as joyful participants in a grand cosmic dance. Their very existence was a melody of peace, a feathered testament to a creation that was not only powerful and orderly, but also beautiful, communicative, and deeply, inherently good. The sky was no longer just a space. It was a society, a gallery, and a concert hall, all soaring on the wings of the creatures God had made and declared with profound satisfaction to be very good. Chapter 9. The Beasts of the Earth. The symphony of creation was reaching its crescendo. The skies now thrummed with the beat of wings, and the seas teemed with swarming life. But the earth itself, the great foundation of soil and stone, remained a stage awaiting its principal actors. The forests stood in silent majesty, their canopies sheltering empty spaces beneath. The plains stretched out, their grasses swaying for no herds to graze. The mountains brooded, their cliffs and caves devoid of any presence but the wind. The land, for all its verdant beauty, was a kingdom without subjects, a home without inhabitants. But the divine intention was for completion, for the filling of every niche and the animation of every landscape. The command that now resonated from the heart of the Creator was not directed at the waters or the firmament, but at the dust itself, a summons for the soil to yield up its final, most diverse offering of life, the beasts of the earth. The ground, which had already proven its generative power by sprouting vegetation, now stirred with a deeper, more complex vibration. It was a rumbling not of tectonics, but of genesis, as if the very atoms of the soil were rearranging themselves into forms of muscle, bone, and sinew. From the rich, dark loam of the river valleys, the first of the cattle began to rise. They emerged not in a frantic burst, but with a slow, deliberate solidity, as if being sculpted from the earth by an invisible hand. A great bull was the first, his form materializing from the ground up, massive hooves of polished jet, powerful legs corded with muscle, a broad chest, and a head that bore the nascent curve of formidable horns. His hide was the color of wet earth, and as he shook the soil from his back, his first breath steamed in the cool morning air. Around him, the cows and calves rose, their forms gentler, their eyes large and liquid with the innocence of first consciousness. They were creatures of the field, built for grazing and herd life, their very presence a promise of placid abundance and future sustenance. But the earth's yield was not limited to the docile and the domestic. From the shadowy fringes of the forests and the rocky, inaccessible highlands, a different kind of life began to creep and stalk into being. These were wild beasts, the untamed expressions of divine power and freedom. A great lion coalesced from the dappled light and shadow. Beneath a baobab tree, his tawny coat a perfect mimicry of the dry grass, his mane a magnificent shaggy crown. He stretched, his claws unsheathing to rake the soil, and a low rumbling growl vibrated in his chest, the first sound of predatory sovereignty. Elsewhere, a bear, heavy with latent strength, pushed itself up from a river bank, water and mud sluicing from its thick, dark fur. It stood on its hind legs, sniffing the air, a creature of immense, solitary power. The creeping things, too, answered the call. A serpent, its scales a mosaic of emerald and gold, slithered soundlessly from a crevice, its body a fluid rope of muscle, its tongue flickering to taste the new world. From under a fallen log, 1,000 insects scurried, beetles with iridescent shells, ants in disciplined columns, spiders spinning the first silken traps in the dewy grass. The formation of these creatures was a showcase of God's limitless imaginative power. Every anatomical detail was a solution to a specific challenge of terrestrial life. The long, powerful legs of the deer were crafted for leaping and flight, their large ears swiveling to catch the faintest sound of danger. The padded feet of the cat allowed for silent stalking, while the heavy, column-like legs of the elephant were engineered to support a colossal frame. The exoskeleton of the beetle was a marvel of lightweight armor, and the complex, compound eyes of the fly offered a panoramic view of its world. There was no template, no repetitive design. Each kind was a unique invention, a specific thought realized in flesh and blood and chitin. The creative mind that had conceived the whirlpool galaxy and the double helix of a vine had now turned its attention to the knobbly spine of the pangolin and the powerful, coiled spring of the kangaroo's hindquarters. Their initial movements were a hesitant exploration of a world they were made to master. The cattle took their first clumsy steps, their heavy bodies testing the solidity of the ground before they lowered their heads to crop the sweet grass, an instinct as old as their creation. The lion's first stalk was a slow, deliberate placement of one paw before the other, a dance of potential energy that would one day end in an explosive sprint. The deer, sensing the predator, flicked its white tail and bounded away in a series of graceful arcing leaps, defining the relationship between hunter and hunted from their very first moments. The smaller creatures, the mice, the lizards, the rabbits, darted for cover, their movements a frantic, vital blur that populated the undergrowth with bustling life. The earth was no longer a passive landscape of plant and stone. It was now a dynamic, breathing, and moving world. Its every hill and valley, its every forest and plain, now occupied by the magnificent, diverse, and divinely imagined beasts of the field, the forest, and the dust. The initial stirrings of terrestrial life gave way to a complex and deeply ingrained tapestry of instincts, each a silent, pre-written scripture guiding the beasts in their newly appointed roles. The great herds of grazing animals did not need to be taught to seek the tenderest shoots of grass or the cleanest watering holes. A deep, ancestral knowledge pulsed within them, directing their migrations across the plains in vast, rumbling rivers of life. They moved with a collective mind, their formations shifting to protect the young and the weak at the center, their very existence a slow, rhythmic harvest of the earth's abundance. In the shadowed forests, the predator's instincts were sharper, more focused. A wolf pack, materialized complete with its social hierarchy, knew without instruction how to coordinate a hunt. Their movements, a silent language of glances and postures, driving an elk with a strategic pressure that was both ruthless and beautiful in its efficiency. The solitary hunter, like the great cat perched on a rocky outcrop, understood patience as a primary weapon, its body coiled with an energy that awaited the perfect fleeting moment to strike. Every twitch of an ear, every sniff of the air, every cautious step was an expression of a wisdom embedded directly into their flesh, a divine programming that ensured a balance of the wild. Their habitats became extensions of their being, each environment sculpted not only by divine command, but now also shaped by the lives it sustained. The burrowing creatures, the badger, the fox, the rabbit, immediately began to modify the earth itself, their claws digging intricate warrens and dens that would aerate the soil and provide shelter for generations. The beaver, instinct driving it to the flowing stream, began its work of felling saplings with its powerful chisel-like teeth, its construction of a dam an act of ecological engineering that would create new wetlands, slow erosion, and alter the very course of the waterway. High in the canopy, the arboreal creatures claimed their kingdom. Monkeys with prehensile tails swung through the branches with an acrobatic grace that turned the forest into a three-dimensional city, while sloths, already moving with a deliberate energy-conserving languor, became living ornaments amidst the epiphytes. From the scorching arid deserts where camels walked with splayed feet across the burning sands, to the frozen tundras where the musk ox formed its defensive circle against an imagined chill. Every beast was perfectly suited to its home, its instincts a key perfectly fitted to the lock of its environment. The diversity was not merely in form and function, but in the very essence of their created purpose. The industrious ant, a tiny speck of organized purpose, marched in lines that followed chemical trails laid down by its sisters, its life a testament to the glory of community and relentless work. The solitary eagle, nesting on a wind-scoured crag, embodied the virtues of keen vision, independence, and sovereign power. The playful otter, sliding down a muddy bank into a river, seemed created purely for the expression of joy and social bonding. The gentle giraffe, browsing the high acacia leaves, was a walking monument to grace and specialized adaptation. Each creature, from the mightiest elephant to the most humble earthworm, was a unique facet of a boundless divine intelligence. The cunning of the fox reflected an aspect of divine wisdom, the strength of the ox another, the patience of the spider yet another. The whole of the animal kingdom was a vast living library, each volume written in the language of instinct and form, together composing an intricate revelation of the Creator's multifaceted character. And as the Creator observed this completed terrestrial world, the herds moving across the plains, the predators resting in the shade after the hunt, the tiny insects pollinating the first flowers, the entire land now pulsing with a harmonious, interlocking system of life, a deep and final satisfaction settled upon the sixth day. This was not the sharp joy of a single command fulfilled, but the rich, complex pleasure of a symphony reaching its final resonant chord. He saw the lion and the lamb existing in their created balance, not yet in allegorical peace, but in an ecological harmony where each had its place and purpose. He saw the provision he had made for them all, the grasses for the grazer for the predator, the decaying matter for the soil enrichers, and it was very good. The pleasure was in the system itself, a self-sustaining, vibrant, and gloriously diverse community of life, all flowing from the dust of the earth and all reflecting a different shade of his infinite wisdom. This satisfaction was the seal upon the work of the land. The beasts of the earth were not an afterthought, but the culmination of its preparation. They were the managers, the cultivators, the inhabitants that turned a beautiful landscape into a living, breathing world. In their instincts, he saw his own providential care encoded. In their diversity, he saw the unbounded creativity of his own mind. In their simple, purposeful existence, he saw a reflection of his own joy in being. The thematic truth was now manifest. Every creature, from the soaring eagle to the burrowing mole, was a unique and intentional expression of divine wisdom, a living testament to a Creator whose imagination was as deep as the seas, as high as the heavens, and as rich and varied as the teeming, vibrant earth itself. Chapter 10. The Crown of Creation, Humanity. The cosmos was now a masterpiece of orchestrated life. The heavens declared their glory with sun, moon, and stars. The seas teemed with a kaleidoscope of swimming forms. The air thrummed with the vibrant energy of winged creatures, and the earth itself was alive with the stirrings of every beast of the field and forest. Each realm was filled, each niche occupied, each rhythm established. Yet a profound and deliberate silence lingered at the heart of all this bustling activity. The world was rich with life, But it was a life of instinct and function, beautiful and complex, yet lacking a certain quality of consciousness, a capacity for relationship that could look upon the work and know the worker. The creation was a magnificent artifact, but it had no curator, no steward, no heart that could comprehend its beauty and return the love of its maker. It was in this moment of cosmic completion and personal incompleteness that the divine deliberation began, a council within the Godhead that would culminate in the act that would crown all creation. The voice that had spoken light, firmament, and life into being now spoke within the eternal fellowship of Father, Son, and Spirit. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. The words were not a command to the elements, but a solemn resolution, a turning inward of creative power to conceive a being of a wholly different order. This was not to be another creature, however magnificent, defined by its habitat and its instincts. This was to be a reflection, a mirror, held up to divine nature itself. The deliberation was not one of power, for that had been amply demonstrated, but one of relationship. The triune God, existing in the perfect loving community of persons, would now create a being capable of entering into that communion, a creature who could bear the imprint of personhood, will, and moral capacity. The special role of this new being was immediately declared. They were to have dominion. This was not the dominion of a tyrant, but the stewardship of a viceroy, a representative authority flowing directly from the Creator's own sovereignty. They were to rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing that moved on the earth. This mandate was not an afterthought, but the very reason for their unique creation. The world, in all its intricate, interconnected beauty, needed a mind to understand it, a will to care for it, and a heart to love it as God loved it. The animals lived within the creation. Humanity would be appointed to tend it, to name it, to cultivate its potential, and to offer its praises back to the throne of grace. They were to be the priests of the natural world, the conscious voice of an unconscious cosmos, the bridge between the dust of the earth and the glory of heaven. This act of creation would be fundamentally different from all that had preceded it. The plants had sprung from the soil. The animals had been brought forth from the earth and waters, but humanity would be fashioned in the image of God. The thematic focus shifted from the power that commands to the intimacy that forms. This was not to be a spoken into being from a distance, but a hands-on personal act of crafting. The very method implied a closeness, a deliberate, careful shaping that spoke of value and purpose. The creation of humanity was to be an act of self-disclosure. God imprinted upon the physical world in a way that would allow for knowing and being known. The relationship was the goal. A creature who could respond, could choose, could love, and could, in a mystery beyond comprehension, fellowship with the infinite. The deliberation hung in the air, a sacred pause before the final, most intimate act. The stars seemed to burn a little brighter, the seas to still their waves, the forests to hold their breath. All of creation, in its vast and varied chorus, was poised on the brink of meeting its master, its partner, its mirror. The crown of all that had been made was not a thing but a person, a being born from divine counsel, fashioned for divine relationship, and appointed for a sacred dominion that would forever bind the fate of the earth to the choices of its human heart. The stage was set not for another species, but for a dynasty of image-bearers, through whom God would be known and his creation lovingly governed. The divine deliberation, a sacred echo in the hall of creation, now gave way to a profound and intimate act. The voice that had thundered over the waters and ignited the sun fell into a purposeful silence. This was not a work for a word alone, but for the hands of the Maker. The Lord God, who had shaped mountains and carved ocean trenches with a mere thought, now bent his attention to the dust of the earth. It was not the dust of a particular sacred place, but the common, humble soil from which the grasses and trees had sprung, the very substance of the foundation he had laid. He gathered it, this dry, unpromising earth, and began to shape it with an infinite personal care. This was not the instantaneous materialization of the beasts. This was a slow, deliberate sculpting, a potter working the clay with a focus that spoke of love and intention. Under the divine fingers, the dust began to cohere, to take on a form both familiar and utterly new. A head was shaped not with the snout of a predator or the beak of a bird, but with a face designed for expression, for communication, for the complex play of thought and emotion. A torso was formed, housing a cavity for lungs that would breathe a different kind of air and a heart that would beat for more than mere survival. Arms and hands were crafted not with claws for tearing or hooves for running, but with palms and fingers of astonishing dexterity. Tools for building, for creating, for tenderly holding and carefully shaping the world they were made to rule. Legs and feet were fashioned for stability and for walking upright, a posture that would allow their gaze to be fixed not only on the ground for food, but on the heavens in wonder and upon the horizon in dominion. The form was complete, a masterpiece of terrestrial engineering, a statue of the finest earth. But it was only a statue, a shell of exquisite design, lying inert and silent upon the riverbank where it had been formed. It had the image, but not the life. Then the Creator leaned close. The gulf between the infinite and the dust was bridged in a single, breathtaking act of intimacy. The Lord God did not command life into the form from a distance, as he had with the Leviathan or the eagle. He bent his face to the earthen face and breathed. It was not a wind that stirred the trees, but the breath of life itself. Nishmat Chayim, a direct impartation of his own spirit. The air that left the divine lungs was charged with the essence of consciousness, of will, of soul. It flowed into the nostrils of the dust-formed man, a rushing, silent river of vitality that filled every part of the sculpted frame. The transformation was instantaneous and total. The cool, dry clay warmed with a Russian heat. The chest, which had been still, expanded with its first shuddering inhalation. The heart, a fist of dormant muscle, contracted and began its steady rhythmic drumming, pushing blood through newly formed vessels. The eyelids, which had been sealed, fluttered and opened, revealing eyes that were not merely organs of sight, but windows of a newly awakened soul. The man drew a second breath, then a third, his own now, and the breath of God became the living soul of the man. He was no longer a composition of earth. He was a living being, a nephesh chaya, but of a kind entirely distinct from all other living souls. The life within him was not just biological animation, it was a spark of the divine, the capacity to know, to love, to reason, and to choose. This intimate moment, the joining of divine breath to earthen form, underscored the sacredness of human life in a way nothing else could. Every other creature had been called forth by command. This one had been personally enlivened by the Creator's own breath. His life was not an emergent property of the cosmos, but a gift bestowed directly from the source of all life. The soil of the earth was his mother, but the breath of God was his father. This dual origin set him eternally apart, forever tied to the physical world, yet forever bearing within him the immortal imprint of his Maker. He was of the earth, earthy, yet he carried heaven in his lungs. The man, Adam, the one formed from the red earth, now lived, his every breath a perpetual reminder of the intimate personal involvement of the God who had not just spoken him into existence, but had breathed his own life into him, crowning the dust with a glory that would forever echo in the silence between heartbeats. The first man, Adam, drew the air of the new world into lungs that had been filled by the breath of God, his consciousness unfolding like a flower to the dawn. He saw the light filter in through the leaves, felt the coolness of the soil beneath his feet, heard the distant call of a bird and the rustle of a creature in the undergrowth. He was the center of a perfected world, a living soul woven from the dust of the earth and the spirit of the eternal. And into this moment of pristine awakening, the voice of the Creator spoke again, not in the intimate whisper of impartation, but with the resonant tone of commissioning, a divine blessing that would define the purpose and trajectory of his existence and of all who would come from him. The words fell upon him not as a burden, but as the charter of his being, the activation of his sacred role. The blessing was threefold, a powerful triad of purpose that wove together the physical, the social, and the sovereign. Be fruitful and multiply, came the first imperative, a command that was also a gift of generative power. This was not merely a biological function, but the sacred mechanism for filling the earth with God's image. The man and the woman who would soon be brought to him were blessed to become a family, and from that family, nations. Their fruitfulness was the means by which the divine likeness would be stamped upon every continent, every valley, every shore. It was an invitation to participate in the ongoing work of creation, to share in the joy of bringing forth new life that would also bear the imprint of the Maker. The empty spaces of the earth were not to remain empty. They were to be filled with communities of those who could know God, a multiplication of hearts capable of love and minds capable of wonder. The second command, replenish the earth, carried the connotation of subduing it, of drawing out its latent potentials. The earth was already good, abundantly provisioned and beautifully ordered, but it was not a static museum. It was a dynamic system waiting for the conscious, creative touch of its steward. Humanity was blessed and commanded to cultivate the garden, to harness the rivers for irrigation, to mine the mountains for minerals, to study the patterns of the stars for navigation, to compose music from the wind and stories from the history written in the stones. This replenishment was an active, intelligent partnership with the created order, a calling to develop the raw, glorious potential of the world into a civilization that reflected the wisdom and creativity of its king. They were to be co-regents in the work of bringing the earth to its full intended flourishing. The third facet of the blessing established the hierarchy of care. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. This dominion was the cornerstone of their unique identity. It was not a license for exploitation, but a sacred trust, a responsibility modeled on the character of God Himself. Just as God ruled the cosmos with wisdom, justice, and benevolence, so humanity was to rule the earth. They were to be the shepherds of the flocks, the protectors of the forests, the stewards of the seas. Their authority was to be characterized by understanding and compassion, for they alone among the creatures could comprehend the needs of the sparrow and the requirements of the ox, could appreciate the beauty of the lily and the complexity of the hive. Their rule was meant to be a reflection of God's own rule, a dominion of service, of provision, and of profound respect for the value of every created thing. This trinity of commands, to multiply, to cultivate, and to rule, established the profound framework of human responsibility. They were not created as passive inhabitants, but as active, empowered partners with God in the care and development of His world. The partnership was not one of equals, but of a loving sovereign and His appointed representatives. God provided the raw material, the laws of nature, and His sustaining power. Humanity was to provide the conscious will, the creative effort, and the loving attention. The earth was their inheritance, but also their assignment. Their every act of planting a field, of tending a flock, of building a home, of raising a child, was to be an act of worship, a fulfillment of this divine partnership. They were the hands and heart of God upon the earth, created to exercise a dominion that would cause the whole creation to sing His praises more fully, and so the crown of creation was set in place. Humanity stood at the nexus of heaven and earth, a being of dust and divinity, blessed with purpose and partnered with God. The man, hearing these words, felt their truth resonate in the core of his being. This was why he had been made. This was the meaning of the breath in his lungs and the image in his soul. He was to be a creator, a cultivator, a king under the great king. The entire cosmos, from the circling galaxies to the burrowing worm, now had a conscious heart at its center, a steward to love it, a priest to bless it, and a partner through whom God's gracious rule would be lovingly administered upon the earth. The creation was now complete, not merely because it was full, but because it was loved by one who could love it back. Chapter 11. The Garden of Eden. From the rich, dark soil of the newly fashioned world, a place of surpassing beauty began to take root, a location chosen by the Creator as the perfect home for His image-bearer. It was not a random plot of land, but a deliberate, concentrated expression of all the goodness that had thus far been spread across the globe. In the east, in a land called Eden, the Lord God planted a garden. This was no mere grove of trees or a simple cultivated plot. It was a sanctuary of abundance, a living tapestry woven from every pleasant and profitable thing the earth could offer. The very act of planting implied a tender, personal care, a divine horticulture that would prepare a dwelling place of unparalleled splendor and provision, a microcosm of the world's perfection designed for intimate fellowship. The garden's lush beauty was a symphony for the senses. A river, clear as crystal, flowed through its heart, not from some distant mountain source, but rising from the ground within Eden itself, as if the garden were a spring of life for the entire land. It watered the soil, which was deep and fertile, a loamy black earth that seemed to pulse with generative power. From this soil, the Creator caused to grow every tree that was pleasing to the sight. Their canopies formed a vault of living green, dappling the ground below with shifting patterns of sun and shadow. The trees were not merely functional, they were works of art. Some had bark that peeled in papery curls of cinnamon brown, while others stood with trunks smooth and pale as moonlight. Their leaves were of every conceivable shape: the delicate compound fronds of the acacia, the broad glossy fans of the fig, the needle-like clusters of the cedar, each rustling with a different voice in the wind that whispered through the branches. And the trees were good for food. The air in the garden hung heavy with the sweet, ripe scent of fruit. Clusters of grapes, plump and deep purple, hung from sturdy vines that twined around ancient trunks. Apple and pomegranate trees bent their branches low, their offerings glowing like rubies and emeralds amidst the foliage. There were fruits of every kind: citrus with their bright, sharp perfume, soft berries that stained the fingers, and heavy melons cooling in the shade. The abundance was not sparse or seasonal, but constant and overwhelming, a perpetual harvest that required no toil, only the simple, joyful act of reaching out a hand. The ground between the trees was carpeted with edible herbs and tender greens, while tubers and roots swelled in the dark earth, a hidden bounty waiting to be discovered. This was a place of sensory delight, where beauty and sustenance were inextricably linked, where every glance and every taste was a reminder of the generous heart of the provider. Into this perfected landscape the Lord God placed the man. It was not a banishment to a wilderness, but a gentle, deliberate leading, a bringing of Adam to the place prepared specifically for him. The man, whose lungs still held the memory of divine breath and whose soul was freshly imprinted with the mandate to rule, now opened his eyes within the confines of this paradise. He saw the river sparkling as it broke into four heads to water the wider earth beyond the garden's bounds. He saw the trees, heavy with fruit, their branches an invitation. He felt the perfect climate, neither too hot nor too cold, where the air itself seemed to nourish him. This garden was more than a home. It was a perfect expression of the divine intention for humanity, a place of safety, of relationship, of effortless provision, and of beautiful, purposeful work. It was the plot point upon which human history would turn, the epicenter of a relationship between creator and creature, a perfect home established as the starting point for the great human story. Amid the garden's overwhelming abundance, two trees stood apart from all others, their presence a quiet but profound mystery woven into the heart of paradise. They were not marked by greater size or more dazzling foliage, yet they held a gravity that seemed to draw the very air around them into a deeper stillness. One was the tree of life, its boughs heavy with fruit that glowed with a soft internal luminescence, each piece a perfect vessel of sustaining vitality. To eat of it was to partake of unending vigor, a perpetual communion with the source of existence itself, a symbol of the eternal life offered in the presence of God. Its very existence was an invitation to an unbroken, everlasting fellowship, a promise that the bliss of the garden need never end. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It stood with a solemn dignity, its fruit appearing no less beautiful, its form no less perfect than its counterpart. Yet it was singular, set apart by a divine injunction that now echoed in the garden's tranquil air. The Lord God, who had provided so lavishly, spoke to the man with a clarity that brooked no ambiguity. His voice not one of threat, but of loving, solemn warning. He commanded the man, saying he was free to eat from every tree in the garden, a testament to the boundless provision laid before him. But of this one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he was not to eat. The consequence was stark and absolute, for in the day that he ate of it, he would surely die. This command introduced the nascent and terrifying theme of choice into the perfection of Eden. Up until this moment, all of creation had operated on the principle of obedient response to divine will. The light had separated, the waters had gathered, the plants had sprouted, all in flawless, instantaneous alignment with God's spoken word. But here, in the heart of the garden, was a creature capable of hearing a command and choosing otherwise. The potential for relationship, so carefully crafted through the impartation of God's own breath, now hinged on the fragile, powerful faculty of the human will. Obedience was the pathway to continued life, the means by which the relationship would be nurtured and sustained. It was the one boundary in a world of limitless freedom, a single test of trust in the goodness of the Creator's design. The knowledge offered by the forbidden tree was not merely intellectual, it was experiential, a knowledge gained by crossing a divinely appointed boundary. To seize it would be to define good and evil on humanity's own terms apart from God, to step from the dependent trust of a child into the arrogant autonomy of a self-declared God. It was the potential for a relationship fractured by distrust, for life exchanged for a hollow mortal wisdom. The command itself was the safeguard, the protective fence around the sacred space of communion. It defined the terms of the relationship, God as the loving authority and provider, humanity as the trusting and obedient steward. The tree stood as a perpetual monument to the fact that true life, true knowledge, and true relationship were found not in grasping for godhood, but in joyful submission to the one who was already God. And so, the garden held its breath, a paradise poised on the precipice of love's great risk. The tree of life promised an eternity of blissful fellowship, while the tree of knowledge held the shadow of a different future. The choice was a sacred trust, the core of the covenant between the Creator and His image-bearer. In that quiet space between the two trees, the entire potential of the human story, of love chosen or love spurned, of life embraced or death incurred, hung in the balance, waiting for the movement of a human hand and the decision of a human heart. Chapter 12, The Divine Rest. The great work was finished. The final resonant chord of the creative symphony had faded into a profound and holy silence. The heavens and the earth were complete, and all their vast, teeming host. The sun no longer journeyed across a sky awaiting its purpose. It now ruled a day filled with the darting of birds and the busy hum of insects. The moon no longer presided over an empty night. Its silver light now fell upon sleeping creatures in forest dens and grazing herds on the starlit plains. The seas, once a formless deep, now pulsed with the endless swirling dance of fish and leviathan. The land, once bare and silent, was now a living tapestry of rooted life and roaming beasts. And at the heart of it all, in a garden of unutterable beauty, walked the man and the woman, their every breath a conscious echo of the divine breath that had given them life, their every glance an act of love and stewardship over the world entrusted to their care. The cosmos was no longer a project. It was a perfected reality. And on the seventh day, God rested. This was not a rest of exhaustion, for the voice that had spoken galaxies into being does not grow weary. It was not a rest of cessation, for his sustaining hand still upheld every atom, and his attentive gaze still fell upon every sparrow. This was a rest of completion, a divine and sovereign pause, a ceasing from the specific, formative work of creation. It was the rest of an artist who, having put the final brushstroke on a masterpiece, steps back to behold the whole. It was the rest of a king who, having established his kingdom and appointed his stewards, enters into the enjoyment of his reign. The frantic, glorious energy of speaking, separating and filling, gave way to a deep, tranquil stillness. The creative word, which had resounded through the void, now settled into a silent, satisfied contemplation of all that had been spoken into existence. This rest was imbued with a peace that was more than the absence of noise. It was a positive, tangible presence, a shalom that settled over the entirety of the new creation. It was a harmony, a state of things as they were always meant to be. In the garden, the peace was the trust between the man and his Creator, the unbroken fellowship that walked in the cool of the day. On the plains, it was the balance between the lion's strength and the deer's swiftness, a dynamic equilibrium where life and death served a larger, harmonious purpose. In the seas, it was the perfect fit of every creature to its niche, the great, self-sustaining cycle of life that swarmed and multiplied according to its blessed kind. The very air seemed to hum with this peace, a low, resonant frequency of fulfillment that vibrated through rock and leaf, through water and flesh. It was the peace of a complex, interlocking system functioning in flawless unity, a cosmos at rest in the will of its maker. And this rest was holy. The seventh day was set apart, consecrated by the divine presence that now dwelt within it in a new way. Where before God had been the active agent of formation, he was now the serene inhabitant of the finished work. His holiness, which had been demonstrated in the power that brought order from chaos, was now revealed in the tranquility that crowned that order. This sanctity seeped into the fabric of the day itself, making it a temple in time, a sacred interval where the rhythm of doing yielded to the deeper rhythm of being. It was a day for the creation to simply exist, to reflect the glory of its Creator, not by its growth or its labor, but by its very being, by the simple, profound fact that it was, and that it was good. The man and the woman made in God's image were the conscious participants in this holy rest. Their first full day of existence was not a day of toil, but a Sabbath, an invitation to enter into God's own contentment, to share in his joyful appraisal of a world brought to perfect and glorious completion. The themes of fulfillment were woven into every aspect of this divine repose. The longing of the void was fulfilled with substance. The potential of the formless deep was fulfilled with teeming life. The hope of the raw earth was fulfilled with a verdant fruit-bearing garment. The need of the sky was fulfilled with guiding lights. The silence of the garden was fulfilled with the footsteps of its stewards. Every command had been met with a perfect yes. Every intention had been realized. There were no loose threads, no half-finished corners, no unmet needs. The Creator looked upon all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. The rest of the seventh day was the seal upon this fulfillment, the divine affirmation that the work was not merely done, but done perfectly. It was the deep, satisfying sigh of a love that has given its all and now delights in the gift, a completion so absolute that the only proper response was a sacred, joyful, and holy rest. The tranquility of the seventh day was not a passive emptiness, but a vessel waiting to be filled with sacred significance. The divine contemplation that had settled over the finished creation now focused into a deliberate, sovereign act of consecration. The Creator, who had spoken light into being and named the seas, now spoke a blessing over the day itself, imbuing the very fabric of time with a purpose that would echo through all generations. He blessed the seventh day. The word carried the same creative power that had fashioned the Leviathan and the eagle, but here it was directed not at substance, but at sequence, not at space, but at rhythm. The blessing was a charge of sacredness, an infusion of divine favor that set this day apart from the six that had come before. It was to be a day crowned with a different kind of fruitfulness, not of multiplying cells or sprouting seeds, but of spiritual replenishment, a weekly returning to the source of all life and all peace. And he sanctified it. This was the act that sealed its eternal purpose. To sanctify is to set apart for holy use, to mark as belonging uniquely to God. The seventh day was thus hallowed, its hours becoming a temple not made with hands, a sanctuary in time where the clamor of creation and cultivation would fall away, and the primary reality would be the presence of the Creator. This sanctification was a gift, a divine institution etched into the calendar of the cosmos. It established a pattern for all that was to come, a rhythm of work and rest, of engagement and withdrawal that mirrored the very heartbeat of God. The 6 days of formation and filling were good, but the seventh was holy, a perpetual reminder that the world's value was found not only in what could be made from it, but in its capacity to host the sacred, to provide a space for creation to commune with its Creator. In the heart of God, a profound and generative contentment bloomed. This was not the satisfaction of a task completed, but the deeper, richer joy of a relationship inaugurated. His rest was not a withdrawal into solitude, but an open-handed invitation. He looked upon the man and the woman, walking in the dappled light of the garden, and his contentment was multiplied in their shared experience of the day's peace. He saw the lion cease its stalking to lie in the sun, the eagle perched in silent vigil on its crag, the great whales moving with a slow, peaceful grace through the deep. The entire cosmos, from the spinning galaxies to the rooted clover, was invited to participate in this divine pause. The rest was not for God alone. It was the atmosphere of His kingdom, the intended state for all He had made. The invitation was implicit in the very stillness of the air, the gentle quality of the light, the unhurried pace of the rivers, a call for every living thing to lay down its striving and simply be, to exist in conscious, grateful harmony with the God who had made it all. This divine contentment was characterized by a quiet, potent joy. It was the joy of a father watching his children explore the perfect home he had built for them, a joy that found its fulfillment in their delight. God's pleasure was not in the silent perfection of the garden alone, but in the sound of the man's footsteps, in the woman's gaze of wonder at a new flower, in the trust that allowed them to walk unafraid in His presence. His rest was an active enjoyment of His creation's enjoyment. He delighted in the way the newly made world reflected his character, his creativity in the butterfly's wing, his power in the thunder of a distant waterfall, his order in the migration of the birds, and his love in the fellowship he shared with his image-bearers. The seventh day was the first day of this eternal relationship, a day dedicated not to making, but to knowing and being known. And so, the sacred time was established, a cornerstone of cosmic order as fundamental as the separation of light from dark or the gathering of the waters. It was a testament to a God whose ultimate goal was not merely a functioning universe, but a communion. The blessing and sanctification of the seventh day was a promise etched into time itself, a promise of regular renewal, of ceaseless invitation, of a rest that would forever remain available to a weary world. It was the culmination of all that had been made, the point where creation achieved its purpose, to be a dwelling place for God and His people, a realm where work would always be crowned with rest, and where the heart of the Creator could forever find its home in the shared holy contentment of His creation. Chapter 13, The Sacred Covenant. In the lingering holiness of the seventh day, a profound truth settled over the cosmos, as tangible as the morning dew on the petal of a rose. The universe was not a mere artifact of power, but a living testament to a relationship, a sacred covenant written not on stone, but in the very atoms of existence. The ongoing bond between the Creator and His creation, particularly the humanity fashioned in His image, was the silent, beating heart of all that was. The light did not shine merely to illuminate, but to reveal His glory. The mountains did not stand only to display His strength, but to offer a place of meeting. The seas did not teem solely to demonstrate abundance, but to whisper of the depths of His love. Every leaf, every star, every breath of every creature was a syllable in an unending love letter, a declaration that the purpose of creation was not isolation, but communion. This purpose was woven into the fabric of reality. The celestial dance of the sun and moon was not a cold mechanical clock, but a gentle, rhythmic reminder of His faithful presence, a promise that His care was as constant as the dawn. The intricate web of life, where the soil nourished the grass fed the beast, and the beast returned to the soil, was a masterpiece of reciprocal love, a system where every need was met within the context of a generous, giving community. It reflected a divine economy rooted not in scarcity, but in the boundless overflow of a loving heart. The glory of God was not a distant, abstract light, but was reflected in the patient strength of the oak, the joyful flight of the sparrow, the complex society of the ant, and the quiet intelligence in the eyes of the man as he walked with his Maker. All things, from the grandest galaxy to the most hidden mycelial network, declared His glory by simply being what He had made them to be, each a unique facet of His infinite character. At the core of this cosmic relationship lay the profound theme of love. The act of creation itself was an act of love, the desire for an other to love and to be loved by. The breath of life in Adam's nostrils was the kiss of that love, imparting a soul capable of receiving and returning it. The garden, with its every provision and its every beauty, was a love gift, a prepared home for the beloved. The single command, the one boundary around the tree of knowledge, was not a restriction born of tyranny, but a protection born of love. A father's warning to his child to stay away from the one thing that could shatter the perfect fellowship they shared. The entire narrative, from the brooding over the void to the rest in the garden, was a story of love initiating, love providing, and love inviting a response. Entwined with this love was the sacred charge of stewardship. The dominion given to humanity was the practical expression of the covenant. To rule was to love what God loved, to care for what he cared for, to nurture the world as a faithful gardener tends a plot entrusted to him by its owner. This stewardship was the human side of the partnership, the active participation in the ongoing work of sustaining the beauty and balance of creation. It was a call to exercise authority with the same wisdom, justice, and compassion that characterized the Creator's own rule. To name the animals was to understand them. To cultivate the garden was to help it achieve its full God-given potential. This was not a burdensome duty, but a privileged share in the divine joy of fostering life and beauty. It was how humanity would love God back, by loving and tending to all that he had declared good, and underpinning it all was the promise of an eternal connection. The covenant was not a temporary contract, but an everlasting bond. The tree of life, standing in the center of the garden, was a symbol of this eternal intent, a way for humanity to abide in unbroken fellowship with the source of life forever. Even the rhythm of work and rest, sanctified in the seventh day, was a perpetual promise of return, a weekly renewal of the connection that gave all other activity its meaning. The world was not a self-contained system. It was a dependent creation, upheld by the word of his power and designed for a relationship that would transcend time itself. The glory reflected in all things, the love that motivated every act, the stewardship entrusted to human hands, all pointed toward an unending story of connection between the Creator and his creation, a sacred covenant that would echo through the ages, an unbreakable bond of love, responsibility, and eternal fellowship.